by the way. I'm the education manager here at Lion Country Safari. So let me flip the camera around and I'll have my team introduce themselves. All right, so I have my team here. We are practicing social distancing here. And you are going to see that some of us have masks and then some of us do not. Tina, can you go ahead and tell me a little bit about the social distancing practice we're doing right here?
We're definitely maintaining social distance standards of at least 6 feet apart from everybody close to us. And as you can see, I'm a lot further away than that from the chimpanzees, which is why I'm okay not to wear my mask right now. You can see that the chimp keepers, who are closer to each other and who are closer to the chimps, are all wearing gloves and masks.
Awesome, perfect. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And I noticed that some of our keepers here are on the boat. Is this a particular normal day for everybody?
Yeah, this is pretty normal. What the chimp keepers do, they start off in the morning. They make sure that they get counts of all of the chimps, which means that all of the chimps are accounted for. We know where they all are and that they're all safe and healthy. And then they start off the day generally by doing a medication distribution or a med run. We do have a couple of chimpanzees here that need medications. Chimpanzees are very closely related to us. So Melody here, behind the pole, she's hiding her face right now. Oh, she just looked at me. They do know their names. So Melody here is about to get her diabetic medicine. Melody is diabetic. She also has high blood pressure. So she gets medicated twice a day to help us manage those issues with her. So that's what they're about to start doing. We also do give our chimpanzees multivitamins. So that's another thing that they're going to be getting today.
And so can you tell us what chimps that we have here in the background?
Yeah, so this is Bamboo's group. Bamboo is the big guy here who's paying a lot of attention to the keepers because he wants the treats that they're going to give out. So Bamboo is the alpha, which means he's the one in charge of this group. Melody, as I said, is the one who's sort of hanging on to the pole. She's lower ranking, but she's definitely able to get her medication every day. So she's just sort of put herself a little bit away from the rest of the group. Figment is now clapping at the chimp keepers, letting them know he wants the food and the treats.
Does he do that all the time?
Not all the time, but he definitely knows that's a really effective way to get our attention. Bamboo does it, Luna does it. This whole group kind of has started clapping at us. Melody will wave at us and stick her tongue out. And those are some really fun learned behaviors that we do have our chimpanzees do out here on safari. They also have learned natural behaviors where we do have things set up. Like if you can see that green box behind the chimps there, that's meant to simulate foraging in a termite mound or ant fishing, like what you guys would have seen about in that video. And so what we do, we give them sticks. They modify those sticks in a form of tool use, and then they use them to fish out the various treats that the keepers have placed in that termite box.
They seem to be waiting very patiently.
They are very patient. This group is really pretty relaxed. Of course, now that I've said that, they'll probably start being crazy, but these guys are pretty well behaved. So the first thing they do is they throw a bottle pretty far so that Dandy will go after it. She loves to do that. But that's just because Dandy is very active, very smart, and she's happy to work with us. The goal here, what they really want to be able to do is get Melody her medication. All of what's happening right now is really to distract everybody else so that Melody can get her medication. And there are vitamins, as I said, in these other bottles. It depends on the size of the chimpanzee. So, for instance, very large, he weighs about 160 pounds. He's going to obviously eat a lot more than Melody, who weighs maybe 110 pounds. We give them a complete diet with biscuits that meet all of their caloric needs, really. But we also give them fresh fruit, fresh vegetables. Melody. She's just very patiently waiting. So yeah, Bamboo might eat 10 pounds of food a day, but it's all raw vegetables and fruits, which is very good for these guys.
And how many chimps do we have here at Lion Country Safari?
We have 18 chimpanzees here
18?
on safari.
And are they all together?
No, chimpanzees are very territorial. So we are very careful about who we allow to be in a family group with each other. So Bamboo's group here has 8 chimpanzees that all get along really well most of the time. They do have their family squabbles. You know, sometimes you'll get annoyed at your brother or sister, and that's what we sometimes see here. But for the most part, these guys get along really well. Um, Higgy's group has 6 chimps in it. Ben's group has 4. So we just make sure that we're managing them appropriately as we would in the wild, as we would see them sort of group in the wild. And we certainly don't want anybody having big fights. So it's really based on their personality a lot.
Now, what does their natural habitat look like if they're in the wild?
That's a really good question, and it depends on where you go. So where chimpanzees would have evolved in, and where most chimpanzees live, it's tropical rainforests, and the trees and the forests. It's very shady. It's very like lush, and there's lots of fruit available. However, because of human activities, we've actually seen chimpanzees living very often in savanna woodland as well, in Senegal, West Africa. And there are all sorts of behavioral modifications that they've done so that they can survive in a completely different habitat than what they would normally be living in. Like they'll go in the water very often in Senegal, which chimpanzees have a natural aversion to water. They cannot swim. But in Senegal, they'll very carefully go and they'll dip themselves in the water to cool off. They also use caves all the time, which is really cool. So the thing about chimps is they're super smart and they're able to adapt to a lot of different environments because they're so intelligent.
What would be some of their physical adaptations?
So like I said, they generally live in forests, in rainforests and the tropical rainforest. So some physical adaptations that you'll see with chimps is they have opposable thumbs, opposable toes even. Their feet look a lot like their hands, and they have their big toe is able to grasp things. So you can see Bamboo there kind of using that opposable thumb to capture a tamarin pod. And that's really helpful for them for climbing. They spend a lot of time in the trees. And another really cool adaptation is you can see that their eyes are set forward in their faces, just like ours. They have about the same visual ability as humans. And that's because, again, they're our closest living relatives, and we all evolved to be able to find fruit in the forests. So they need to be able to move from tree to tree. They need to have depth perception. They need to see in color so that they can see those fruits showing up against the trees. So that's another really cool chimpanzee adaptation, is their sight.
Tina, what about behavioral adaptations? What behavioral adaptations can you often see in chimpanzees?
Like I talked a little bit about, you see chimpanzees in Senegal getting in the water, which is something that most chimpanzees don't really like to do. And that's just to keep them cool when they don't really have all the shade of the forest around them. They also have adopted the ability to what's called crop raid, because there's not a whole lot of forest left for some chimpanzee populations. We actually see them going into human villages and taking human food. And so that's a really interesting behavioral adaptation that they've started doing. It can be a little dangerous because the people obviously don't like when they do that. But it's something that's again, they're super smart, and they've learned, oh, we can just take this food versus having to find it somewhere else. So crop raiding is a pretty cool behavioral adaptation. Something that's fun here at Lion Country Safari that we see, our chimpanzees in the wild, chimps don't rely on pointing to talk to each other. They follow each other's gaze. So if a chimp is looking this direction, the other chimps know to kind of look in that direction. Our chimps have picked up that we tend to point as people. So our chimpanzees know very well if we say Bamboo over here, he knows what that means. He knows what a point is, and he follows the point gaze, which is really interesting because it's not something that a lot of times scientists didn't think that chimps could understand pointing. And it's very obvious to those who work with them in human care that, yeah, they totally understand pointing. And sometimes they'll point for something that they want. They'll point at us. So it's an interesting behavioral adaptation that we see here.
You mentioned that the chimps learned how to crop raid, most likely as a result of deforestation. There's not as much food. Are there any other human impacts that have had an effect on their behavior or their adaptations?
So do you mind just giving us, just to repeat that question for us?
Sure. So Tina mentioned that the chimps have been documented as crop raiding or taking crops from farmers in Africa as a result of maybe not as much food being available from deforestation. What are some other human impacts that might have had effects on the chimps' behavior or adaptations?
It's a really good question. So again, the fact that we see chimpanzees in West Africa going into caves. Caves are oftentimes inhabited in West Africa by leopards, which are chimpanzee natural predators. So chimps generally want to avoid caves, but because there's been quite a bit of deforestation in West Africa, we actually see chimpanzees going into those caves pretty often. But there's an interesting adaptation that they've made to be safe is that they spend more time together than what we see in chimpanzees in other regions. They generally have smaller groups. So, for instance, in Central Africa or East Africa, like in Uganda, we can actually see groups of up to 200 chimpanzees. Whereas in West Africa, where the forests are a lot smaller, we see groups of maybe 30 chimpanzees. But those 30 chimpanzees spend more time together than those 200 chimpanzees would in Uganda, and it's a defense that they've adapted.
So Tina, we noticed you're sending us some photos of the nest, and our friends at the school district here actually uploaded some of those photos, and the kids had some questions regarding them. Can you tell us a little bit about why do they build nests in the first place, and do they look very similar to the ones in the wild?
So nest building is a natural, innate behavior that we see in chimpanzees, but it's so complicated that it's also a learned behavior. It's something that they naturally want to do, but they have to be taught how to do it effectively, especially because they tend to do it high up in the trees, and that can be dangerous. They don't want to make a bad nest and fall out of it, right? Because then they could fall pretty far. So chimps in the wild will build these nests so that they can hide from predators like leopards, like I said. And we do see our chimpanzees here at Lion Country Safari building nests every day. We give them all sorts of things that they can make nests out of. And they really do a good job at simulating what those wild nests would look like. In the wild, they're just going to build their nests out of tree branches. They just fold them over and they make a platform and they sleep on it. And you guys would have seen some pictures of what those look like in the forests. Here, we give them hay, we give them wood wool, we give them burlap. We give them clothing, which is how Melody got that jacket that you can see she's wearing. Everybody asks, why does she have a jacket? We gave it to her so that she could build a nest, and instead she decided that she just wanted to keep that jacket with her forever. It's her favorite jacket, favorite thing. And our chimps will make really, if it's cool out, they make giant nests just to keep themselves warm and comfortable overnight. I would definitely sleep in a chimpanzee nest. They look super cozy.
Tina, chimps are pretty cool. They're pretty fascinating.
I agree.
Do they make good pets?
They do not make good pets. So these guys have been behaving very well for you right now. And they're pretty relaxed with each other. But they're with other chimpanzees, so they know how to read each other. They're just as strong as each other. And they're just as smart as one another. But chimpanzees do not make good pets. In fact, no primate makes a good pet. They're very social. They need to be with other chimpanzees. As you can see, they really like spending time together. And they're very intelligent, and they can be very aggressive, and they have really big teeth, and they're super strong. You really don't. It's not fair to the chimpanzee to want it as a pet, because once they get about 5 years old, which is still very young, right? They're way too strong for us to handle. And so that's when people tend to bring them to sanctuaries or to zoos. We do have a couple of chimpanzees here at Lion Country Safari that had been pets at one time. They couldn't be pets anymore because they just got too strong, and they had to come here and learn how to be chimpanzees.
Tina, how old can a chimpanzee be? What's their life expectancy?
That's a really good question. It's a complicated question because if you read the articles, it says that chimps can be about 60 years old maximally. But we had a chimpanzee here who we lost a couple of years ago, little Mama. She was the oldest chimpanzee in the world. And she was definitely way older than 60. We estimate was in her 70s when she passed away. So, but on average, chimpanzees are old at about 30, and they can expect to live till about 60 if they're, lucky. Mama was just she was just a super chimp in every way, and she outlived all of us probably.
I have a question, Tina. didn't you do something with training a chimp with some sort of like a heart monitor?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about, from what I've heard, it was you that came up with that idea. Can you tell us a little bit about what you did?
Yeah, so I was actually up late one night watching TV, and I saw an ad for something called Cardia Mobile, and it was just a really quick ECG monitor where you just put your fingers on it and it'll give you a 30-second electrocardiogram, which tells you all sorts of information about how your heart is functioning, which is really important because humans tend to die pretty often of heart attack and heart disease, and chimpanzees, we see the same sort of problems because, again, they're super closely related to us. They share a lot of our problems, such as heart disease. So we really want to make sure that our chimps are healthy and that their hearts are really strong. So I thought, hey, I could totally train a chimpanzee to use this.
Is this normal?
This is totally normal. This is just them showing that they're excited. The keepers are wrapping up, and they know that means that they're getting their lunch soon. The chimps know our schedule really well. But so we trained our chimps, many of our chimps, like Melody there, to Dandy's trained partially, Bamboo is trained, to just present their fingers to this device, and it reads on my phone. It's just a really easy app, and it tells us about how their heart is functioning. We also have trained a number of them for blood pressure because, again, that can tell us a little bit about how their heart is functioning. And a lot of them will present their chests to us through the mesh, the protective barrier, so that we can actually use an ultrasound probe and get a good look at their hearts.
All right. So I also had a couple questions here just regarding our chimpanzees. So to me, from an outsider looking, they seem really friendly and they seem like they might kind of want to cuddle. Is that true?
No. We joke sometimes. Like, Melody is so relaxed, and she was raised as a pet, so she's definitely more in tune to people than, for instance, Figment or Bamboo or Dandy or Tonic, who were raised here at Lion Country in their social group. We work really hard to have really good relationships with our chimps, but we would still never, ever want to be in the same place as them. Again, they're super strong, and they have really bad tempers, so they can seem like they're fine one second, and then the next second they are really mad, and we don't really understand why sometimes, but they're super mad at each other, and there's a big argument, and we would never want to be in the middle of that because, again, they're really strong.
So what we're going to do next, students, is we're going to open it up to you all. So if you all want to start asking us some questions, I will have your teacher unmute you all, and then you can ask Tina here some questions about the chimps, and we'll be happy to answer anything.
Okay, Lachlan, permission to unmute Lachlan and ask your question.
Are chimpanzees, since they're having less visitors because of the coronavirus, are they acting differently?
That's a really good question. They did at first. They definitely were like, what's going on? Usually when we don't see cars coming through or people visiting the chimps, it's because there's a hurricane coming. So we think that at first they might have been a little concerned that we might be getting a hurricane. But they really, again, they're really quick to adapt. They're really smart, and it only took them a little while before they realized this is just normal now for them. And the chimp keepers make sure to give them lots and lots of attention. So hopefully they don't miss you guys too much, although I'm sure they're looking forward to seeing you guys back on safari very soon.
Okay, next question, Mael. You have permission to unmic, Mael.
Did you ask a question? We didn't hear it if you did.
I forgot.
That's okay.
That's okay. I forget all the time. Look at how cute these guys are. So that's Bamboo, Figment, and then Melody on the right, if you guys want to know their names a little bit.
Genevieve, you can ask your next question. Genevieve?
Do they like having visitors?
So that's a really good question. Our chimps are pretty used to not having a whole bunch of visitors because when people come through the preserve, they stay in their vehicles. So the chimps are used to seeing a lot of cars, but they're not really used to seeing a lot of people. They're more used to seeing their caretakers. And they've definitely been able to spend a lot of time with their caretakers. So they seem like they're doing pretty okay.
Lily, you can ask the next question.
My question was, do chimps live longer in the zoo or in the wild?
That's such a good question. Chimpanzees live longer in a zoo than they do in the wild. Here, as you can see, they're very spoiled. They have veterinary teams that are dedicated to taking care of them. They have their caretakers who take really good care of them every day. We train them to make sure that their hearts are healthy and all sorts of stuff like that. And they get their food handed to them versus having to find it. So in the wild, they're likely to be super old and not live a whole lot longer when they're about 30 to 40. And again, here in human care, they can live till 60 plus.
Thank you. Oliver D., you may ask the next question. You may unmic.
Do they like the sun or the shade more?
Oh, that's a really good question. It depends on the day. If it's a really nice day, they all want to be out in the sun. If it's a really hot day, they tend to want to be in the shade. Our chimps will, like I said, the chimps in Senegal, our chimps will sometimes just dip in the water, even though they can't swim and they're generally not huge fans. They do like to get in it just to cool off a little bit, and then they'll go back to the shade. But it depends on the weather.
Let's go to Jack and Mrs. Cyrek's class. You may ask your question. Jack and Mrs. Cyrek's class, permission to unmic.
Why do they eat ants?
That's a really good question. Yeah.
Great job.
Yeah. So chimps will eat ants because they like to get protein, just like you and I. Protein's a really important part of their diet, and protein's a really important part of their diet, and they can get that from ants. Because like I said, in the wild, they spend most of their time eating fruits and vegetables, which don't tend to have a whole bunch of protein. So that's sort of how they can fill that part of their diet, is by ants and termites. And sometimes they'll even eat monkeys.
Okay, Miles, permission to unmic and ask your question. Miles? We can hear you. Go ahead.
Why are chimps so strong?
That's a really good question. We don't really know the answer why they're so strong, but it probably is because they're supposed to spend so much time up in those trees. If you have to be climbing trees all day, you're probably going to be pretty adapted to do that. And part of that is just being super strong, right?
Yeah. I
Okay.
guess they get a lot of exercise.
All right, Skylar, permission to unmic and ask your question. Skylar?
How long have chimps been alive?
Well, they are our closest living relatives. So millions and millions of years, chimpanzees have been on Earth.
Luca, permission to unmic?
Well, my question is, do they have a playground? And if they do they have it?
So I think your question was, do they have a playground?
Yeah.
Actually, it's funny that you asked that, because we tend to call this structure right here the jungle gym for the chimps. We definitely try to make it so that every island has a really fun area that they can climb really high. And here, that is this jungle gym that we call it. It actually has handholds like a rock wall would. It's got a swing. I don't know if you have a hammock. It's got a little rope cargo net bridge that they like to play in. So yeah,
really
the chimps,
cool.
Yeah, thanks. The chimps like it too.
So why do they have it?
Just to make sure that they're exercising and that they can have fun. We definitely want our chimps to not get bored. right? So we try to make sure that their environment is so that they can exercise and show us some of their natural behaviors like climbing and swinging and things like that.
During coronavirus, I'm bored at home.
All right.
Maybe you should get out there and exercise.
Yeah, exercise is great.
Thank you, Luca. Sarah, permission to ask your question. Sarah, go ahead. Sarah, if you're on, go ahead and ask your question. Otherwise, we'll go to Avik. Okay, Avik, go ahead and ask your question.
How are chimps so smart?
That's a really good question. Chimpanzees are so smart because they need to be to survive. So that's one of the things that really distinguishes chimpanzees and other primates from other mammals. So they're mammals just like a raccoon or a dog is, but primates, the thing that makes them really special is how smart they are. And they just really need to be smart to survive in their environment in Africa. They have to be able to know where the fruit is going to show up. They need to be able to map really big spaces in their head. They need to be able to live really closely with one another, and all of that takes intelligence.
So boys and girls, I want to do a special thing for you. If anybody else has any questions, I would love to have you all email them to us at edgereg@lioncountrySafari.com, and we'll go ahead and send that email over to your teacher so she can see if anybody has any more questions, because I know our keeper team, especially Tina here, would be more than happy to answer.
We love talking about the chimps.
Yes. So I know our friend from Eva is on this, so I'm going to let her be the deciding factor if we want the students to be unmuted from this. But we have Jordan here. Jordan is one of our chimp keepers. And one thing that Jordan loves to do is he loves to have the students participate in a chimp call. So Jordan, do you want to show us how it's done first? And then we can see if the students want to do it.
Absolutely. So what we're going to do today, and hopefully we can get you guys on mic so we can hear you all, is do what's called a pant hoot. And so a pant hoot can mean a lot of different things. But today what we're going to say is we're doing a pant hoot because we're all excited, right? This is exciting. So a pant hoot is different for everybody. So there's no wrong way to do a pant hoot. It has their own pant hoot. I can hear it from 300-400 feet away, and I know who's making that pant hoot. And so it starts out really slow, and then it builds up, and then it goes to the big ending where you're just letting all your emotions out. And so I'll show you how to do it, and then we'll get you guys to do it as well. And I'm sure your parents are going to love this. All right, so again, it starts out really slow, and it builds kind of like a roller coaster kind of going up, right? So it's like this. They hear that, and they hear me do that all the time. So,
all right. Do we want to have some of the students try? Does anybody want to try? Jordan can help you with it too.
Yeah, guys, if you want to join, go ahead and unmute your mic and try out the pant hoot.
All right, so let's do it all together.
We're going to do it just yet. Hold on.
We're going to start at the count of 3.
At the count of 3, okay? And remember, you start out really slow, slowly build up, okay? All right, so
1, 2, 3. All right, everybody. You guys did. And we want to say one. And if anybody has any additional questions, please answer those for you. But for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Lion Country Safari. Thank you so much, Mrs. Swarnar from the Palm Beach County School District. All right, have a great day.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
All right, appreciate it.